Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kayla Batchelor. I am an English major with a sociology minor, and I worked with Dr. Andre Carrington from the English department to compile and now present my completed literature review that focused on how Black authors responded to stereotypes. My motivation to research this particular subject cultivated from my previous research in Black studies, particularly the history of stereotyping from the transatlantic slave trade and the sociological aspects of race in a novel that I decided to add in this current capstone. This capstone essentially closes off my previous research in the sense that I started this literature review knowing that I wanted to show how authors of different times and genres respond to these stereotypes. With that being said, I started asking these research questions at the very beginning of this journey, that being, how do Black authors respond to stereotypes through their own works? And are they direct or are they more subtle in their approaches? Before I introduce three of the primary authors that I focused on throughout my research, I wanted to set the tone for how I organize this approach of stereotyping and the counter discourse following that. For future reference, when I say the term counter discourse throughout the rest of this presentation, I'm essentially saying that there is this existing counter argument to the pre-existing argument that exists that involves the usage of stereotypes. In my literature review introduction, I wanted to start by first giving an example of a form of media, whether it be films or novels, that is known intergenerationally and therefore to a wider audience. The premise of this was to not only introduce the way that I would be introducing the kinds of stereotypes and rebuttals, but also start with a piece that most people would know and explain the general sentiment at the time of media release. I decided to briefly highlight this discourse from the time when Gone with the Wind was released in theaters, though I only highlighted the inherent problems that William L. Patterson discusses throughout his review in The Chicago Defender. For context, the Chicago Defender was one of the first Black American newspapers in the country at the time of this movie release, making the words originating from this platform crucial in understanding a perspective from someone a part of the Black community at that time. Patterson writes, in the martyring this relic of barbarism, Gone with the Wind not only morally justifies the slave breeding pen and the degradation of Negro womanhood and manhood, it has scorned upon and desecrated the love that democratic white America has for freedom and truth. In this excerpt, Patterson criticizes the portrayal of Black people throughout the film and how it essentially rewrites the blood-soaked history of the Civil War through a rose-colored lens. By portraying slaves in this grotesque way, Patterson establishes that Gone with the Wind is harmful and detrimental to combating any ongoing stereotypes that originate from the time when slavery was normalized. The response Patterson exhibits throughout the Chicago Defender article is one of many that were elicited by the release of Gone with the Wind. What should be acknowledged, though, is the way in which writers respond to the longer history of stereotyping about the Black community. Patterson's words reflect this pattern in which Black writers often respond to the perpetuated stereotypes in a variety of ways, whether it be through addressing it directly or alluding to it in symbolic terms. To get a general idea of how they do so, I organized these authors into categories correlating the stereotypes they address in their works. While this presentation will not cover every author and work that I discussed in my literature review, each of the authors and works in this presentation represent the genres I engaged in throughout my undergraduate career with Dr. Carrington's guidance. From left to right, I would like to introduce Colson Whitehead, Zora Neale Hurston, and Octavia Butler, the authors that I will be talking about going forward in this presentation. There are various reasons as to why I chose these authors, with Colson Whitehead being the first author I analyzed through a research lens, and Octavia Butler igniting my interest in Black speculative fiction, though I will further elaborate on each person as I share the counter discourse they discuss in their novels along with my own personal analysis. Oh, whoops. There we go. I decided to first begin talking and adding Colson Whitehead's input in this capstone because of the way he ties racism in the criminal justice system to his various fictional novels. This is first seen in the first novel I ever encountered from him, The Nickel Boys, which is about a young teenage boy by the name of Elwood, who is hitchhiking and wrongfully accused by the police of stealing the vehicle that he is a passenger in. As a result, he is forced to go to a reform school that is Nickel Academy. As he's first adjusting to life in the Nickel Academy, he essentially makes this promise to himself, maybe self reassurance, that kind of thing, saying, I am stuck here, but I'll make the best of it, and I'll make it brief. Everybody back home knew him as even, dependable. Nickel would soon understand that about him too. There is already this underlying acknowledgement that Elwood should have never experienced the level of punishment he was given. Nonetheless, he opts to persist as a means of doing everything possible to treat people with kindness, appear genuinely dependable, and do what he can to figuratively earn his keep with a nickel. By having Elwood approach this dilemma with a positive attitude, Whitehead is effectively flipping the script by asserting that criminalized Black people are more than capable of navigating the twist of the racist criminal justice system with grace and optimism. In The Intuitionists, this tone partially follows with an assertive feel from the protagonist, Lila May. The Intuitionist follows this futuristic world where skyscrapers are a normal architectural feature, making elevator inspection a niche but competitive industry. There are two types of inspectors: empiricists, or people who solely rely on scientific knowledge to look at elevator problems, and intuitionists, or people who rely on their instincts to their surroundings. Intuitionists are often looked down on for there is no real concrete way to show how they accurately find these problems, and this is no different from the first Black female elevator inspector, Lila May, who is framed for causing this elevator to freefall. As she's first discovering that she is the person potentially being blamed for what happened with this massive elevator freefall, Whitehead writes, she needs a night to go over what happened at the Fanny Briggs Memorial Building. Even if they don't believe her, they can't discipline her unless she was negligent, and Lila May will not allow the possibility that she was negligent. It's impossible. Whitehead's declaration of Lila May's determination arguably sets the precedent for finding justice in a system that actively works against people of color. With these odds stacked against Lila, she doesn't hesitate to take the plunge, even if it means fighting against people every step of the way. She's done everything right and played by the rules long enough to understand that her intuition was correct, and by defending it and working endlessly to clear her name, there is this sign of hope. Whitehead is thorough in how he integrates the main characters in this respective mindset, with each character, like Lila May and Elwood, actively doing what they can to combat the integrated racism within the system. Whitehead is ultimately showing that the system is not changing, yet Lila May and Elwood show that determination in the face of adversity is key in reworking public opinion surrounding stereotypes against people within their community. With that, I wanted to shift the focus to counter discourse and religious practices from Ms. Zora Neale Hurston from her work, Mules and Men. I chose to add Zora Neale Hurston because of her experience with the anthropological study of voodoo and how she tactfully chooses to discuss her works and her studies. The novel Mules and Men is essentially a collection of folk stories that Hurston has heard from her trips, whether it be from Florida to New Orleans. She directly addresses the demonized stereotype of voodoo portrayed through westernized media, saying, nobody knows for sure how many thousands in America are warmed by the fire of hoodoo, because the worship is bound in secrecy. That is why these voodoo ritualistic orgies of Broadway and popular fiction are so laughable. The profound silence of the initiated remains what it is. Hoodoo is not drum beating and dancing. And within the same quote, believers conceal their faith. Mouths don't empty themselves unless the ears are sympathetic and knowing. Hurston's decision to remain silent about some topics while clearing the air, though addressing those who cast judgment, is tactful in the sense that it allows preconceived notions to run their course when the true cultural and religious practices of voodoo are preserved. As a result, this practice can thrive genuinely on its own without the harm of these stereotypes, infringing on core ideals that Hurston keeps concealed. In turn, Hurston is taking a defensive stance, letting the words and misinformation take its course through mainstream media, while what she truly values remains concealed through time. With that, I wanted to shift the focus to the sexualization of the Black community and the following counter discourse from Octavia Butler. I decided to integrate Octavia Butler and her work, Dawn, from the Lilith's Brood series because of the way she discussed the concept of body autonomy through her contributions to science fiction. The main premise of this first novel out of this trilogy series, Dawn, is essentially an alternate universe in which the Earth is desecrated by world wars, and a powerful alien race known as the Oankali preserve the human race by essentially abducting them and keeping them on their ship, waiting for the Earth to slowly come back to life. The main character, Lilith, wakes up and is slowly coerced into becoming the human that unites the alien and human race with the goal in mind to essentially come back to Earth and coexist together. There are two separate examples that I will discuss that explain this theme of body autonomy throughout Dawn's work, or Butler's work. Dawn's a novel. The first one being when Lilith is making it explicitly clear throughout the novel that she is not in the emotional or physical state to have children due to a fertility condition that this alien race essentially fixes while she's put under. Yet they force this decision on her, and she finds out at the very end of the novel. When being told that she was going to carry this alien hybrid human race, Lilith responds by saying, "I'm not ready. I will never be ready." This phrase is indicative of where she stood in terms of how she felt, yet these feelings, knowing that she was trapped in this situation, shows through the desperation and how she conveys them. While Lilith's prerogative for maintaining body autonomy is openly conveyed throughout the tale, it is abruptly taken away by this alien race. Another example of this is, well, another example within this theme that transcends throughout the novel is the idea of Lilith being placed with the responsibility for serving as the middlewoman between the human and Oankali race, as she is tasked with leading a group of humans in the process of coexisting and living together on Earth. As she's determining who this future person is, because the alien race gave her the power to essentially wake up other human beings who are in this cryogenic state, um, Lilith is making her own personal observations, saying he had brains and, except for the foolishness of his wives, self-control, exactly what she needed. But she also feared him. What if he decided that she was one of his captors? She was bigger and now certainly stronger than he was, but that did not have to matter. He would have too many chances to attack when she was off guard. This observation is crucial in. Oh, my bad. Notes. Lilith, in turn, is placed into this dilemma regarding her body autonomy and role within the plot of the Oankali's plan. Motherhood is forced onto her inadvertently already, making these crucial decisions that impact the lives of others, as well as being forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy that she later finds out about from the Oankali. Ultimately, Butler's commentary on this subject regarding the situation her Black female character is placed in through a science fiction scope speaks towards the larger issue within the sexualization of Black women, in which Lilith is already responding to in a variety of ways. With that, I wanted to share my developed conclusion in terms of addressing not only these authors and what they had to say, but also what other authors throughout my work had to say as well. And my overall conclusion is that despite the trials and tribulations that the authors and their characters experience throughout each work, there is arguably a value in the different ways they present their counter discourse, whether it be through silence and self-preservation like Hurston or blatant protesting like Whitehood. They know that they are working against an inherently racist system. All of the authors do. Yet they show value in the knowledge that they can impart on their audience despite that. With that, I'd like to briefly acknowledge a few people in my life. I'd like to thank Dr. Andre Carrington and University Honors for the opportunity to partake in this research. I also want to thank my peers, friends, and families for the support. And to my loved ones overseas in the Philippines, I also want to say, maraming salamat at mahal ko kayo. Thank you. And I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Kayla. for this fantastic presentation and